He wanted to save the world. He robbed it instead. At his peak, he was worth $26 billion, and he told everyone on camera again and again that he barely wanted any of it for himself. 2 years later, a federal judge would call his plan one of the biggest financial frauds in American history. This is the story of the man who did the math on being a criminal, and the math told him yes. He wasn't supposed to end up in finance at all. Both of his parents taught law at Stanford. He studied physics at MIT, and somewhere in a college philosophy discussion, he found an idea that would define the rest of his life. The idea had a name: effective altruism. Its founders argued that if you're capable of earning a great deal of money, the most ethical path available to you isn't necessarily charity work, it's earning as much as possible, as efficiently as possible, and giving nearly all of it away. He didn't just agree with the philosophy. He decided to build his entire career around it. He called it earning to give. His first venture was a small cryptocurrency trading firm called Alameda Research, built to exploit tiny price differences between exchanges. It made money quickly. Then, in 2019, he built something bigger, a cryptocurrency exchange of his own called FTX, designed to let ordinary people trade digital currency the way they'd trade stocks on any major platform. FTX grew at a speed almost no financial company in history had matched. Within 3 years, some estimates placed its valuation above $30 billion. Major venture capital firms competed to invest. He bought naming rights to the Miami Heat's arena. He appeared in a Super Bowl commercial alongside a well-known comedian who told the audience straight to camera not to miss out on the next big thing. He testified in front of the United States Congress about how cryptocurrency should be regulated. He met privately with lawmakers and financial regulators. He was photographed beside actors, professional athletes, and even a former head of state. To almost everyone watching from the outside, he looked less like a crypto founder and more like the adult in the room, the one trustworthy figure in an industry that had a reputation for having none. Part of what made him convincing was exactly how unconvincing he looked. He wore rumpled t-shirts and cargo shorts to meetings with billionaires. He slept on a beanbag chair in the office. Reporters wrote again and again about how strange it was that someone worth tens of billions of dollars still drove an ordinary Toyota Corolla. The image did a lot of work for him. Nobody assumes the disheveled physics kid is the one running the con. Behind the exchange sat a second company almost no customer had ever heard of: Alameda Research, the original trading firm, now run day-to-day by a close associate of his named Caroline Ellison, and, for a period of time, his girlfriend. What almost no one outside a small circle knew was that the two companies were never really separate at all. By 2022, FTX and its inner circle were operating out of a shared penthouse compound in the Bahamas. Roughly 10 senior executives lived and worked together in the same buildings, blurring nearly every line a normal, regulated financial company is legally required to keep drawn between itself and any other firm it does business with. In early November 2022, a cryptocurrency news outlet published a leaked balance sheet belonging to Alameda Research. The numbers showed that a huge share of Alameda's assets weren't cash or established currencies or even other major cryptocurrencies. They were FTX's own token, a currency the exchange had invented itself out of thin air and assigned a price to. To anyone who understood how balance sheets are supposed to work, it looked less like a trading firm and more like a company whose main asset was its own IOU. Confidence collapsed within days. Customers who had trusted FTX with their money rushed to withdraw it all at once, the financial equivalent of a bank run. FTX didn't have the money to give back. Investigators would later estimate that roughly $8 billion in customer funds had at various points been quietly moved out of the exchange and into Alameda. Money that customers believed was simply sitting untouched, ready to be withdrawn the moment they wanted it. On November 11, 2022, FTX filed for bankruptcy. In the span of about 1 week, his personal net worth, once estimated at $26 billion, fell to what he himself later described, almost casually, as zero. He remained in the Bahamas for several more weeks before being arrested there in December 2022 and extradited to the United States to face multiple federal fraud charges. His criminal trial, held in a federal court in Manhattan in the fall of 2023, became one of the most closely watched financial cases in a generation. And the most damaging testimony against him didn't come from a government regulator or an outside auditor or a stranger to the company. It came from Caroline Ellison, the person he had personally put in charge of Alameda Research. Testifying under a cooperation agreement with prosecutors, she told the court in plain and specific language that he was the one who had directed her to use FTX customer funds to cover Alameda's mounting losses. What the public hadn't fully absorbed early in the case, what only came into sharp focus as the trial unfolded, was how he had once explained his own personal philosophy about risk years earlier, in a conversation that resurfaced during the proceedings. He had described a hypothetical decision, a coin flip that, on paper, made rational sense to take, again and again, even knowing it carried a real chance of destroying everything, because the expected value, averaged out across every possible outcome, still came out positive. For most people, that's an abstract thought experiment about probability. For him, colleagues and prosecutors argued, it was closer to an actual operating principle. If the math said the total good outweighed the total harm, then any individual harm along the way became, in his own framework, a rounding error rather than a red line. The judge overseeing the case, Lewis Kaplan, did not appear to share that framework. In his remarks at sentencing, he described what he had seen over the course of the trial in blunt terms. A man who knowingly made what the judge called a very bad bet with other people's money, and who never treated the risk as real until it was far too late to undo the damage. In November 2023, a jury found him guilty on all 7 federal charges brought against him, including wire fraud and conspiracy. Judge Kaplan sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. He appealed the conviction and the sentence. In June 2026, the federal appeals court reviewing the case upheld both in full, closing off what had been his last realistic avenue for reversing the outcome. Here's the mechanism that let this happen. When a person believes their life's outcome should be measured only in net good done, any specific harm along the way can get quietly reclassified as an acceptable input to the calculation, rather than a line that can't be crossed. It wasn't that he failed to understand right from wrong. It's that his own framework. Almost none of us will ever run a company or move billions of dollars, but the same substitution happens in miniature all the time. Telling yourself a small dishonesty is fine because the larger outcome you're chasing is good. The danger was never really the math itself. It was trusting the math more than the people that math was quietly being done to. He is currently serving his sentence at a low-security federal prison in California, with a projected release date nearly 2 decades away. The company that was supposed to prove good intentions were enough became instead the case study for why they never are. Should we look at someone who never got caught next, or someone who talked their way into getting caught, like this one?